So, Strive 2.0 has been out for around 2 weeks now, which means I've had a lot of chances to play the game. But before going into this, I had a question on my mind that I wanted to make sure I answered at some point. Is 2.0 an actual massive update, or is this all a marketing stunt? Before 2.0 came out, Arxis were making a big deal saying that it was going to be like a new game. It was going to feel nice and fresh and different. The fact that they were calling it 2.0 makes it feel like it should have been some kind of sequel. So I wanted to check to see how it actually felt. Is 2.0 essentially a sequel, or is it just Season 5 wearing a different mask? And the answer to that is a little bit more complicated than I expected. It doesn't help that we've not gotten everything that 2.0 would give us, but we've been given enough that I can finally come to a decision. So I'm going to walk you through everything that's gone through the update, my general thoughts on all of it, and then finally answer the question. So, let's talk about 2.0. To begin with, the thing that everyone was talking about with 2.0 was the massive balance patch. While the release cycle for the patch notes had the pacing of your average One Piece episode, once we actually got the patch, everyone realized that there was a massive shift from what people expected. There was one massive difference between this patch and essentially every other patch that we've ever gotten for Strive. This patch was absolutely filled to the brim with nerfs. Several universal mechanics were changed drastically, either being completely removed or toned down in such a way that they are much harder to use effectively. This has lended itself to a new philosophy that's happened with Guilty Gear Strive. There's several different core tenets to the update and things that are going to seemingly be preserved as the game continues development. To begin with, defense is now extremely committal. Arxis have been flirting with the idea of committal defense for a few years now. Ever since losing the ability to roam and cancel DPs, Arxis have been dancing around the idea of making defensive options something that you really want to commit to. And now it seems that they finally actually pulled the trigger on this idea. Anything that has any level of invincibility on it at all now can no longer be roam and cancelled. This means that the popular tactic of 100-meter Super RC isn't possible anymore. As well as backdashes of all things, losing the ability to be roam and cancelled. Hell, alongside this, they completely remove the ability to PRC whiffed throws. So if you go to tech and you completely get it wrong, you are opening yourself up for a massive combo. These changes make the defense of Strive much more committal. Anytime you go for an option, you have to make sure that it works because there is no longer a safety net to protect you if you mess it up. You can't backdash and immediately roam and cancel to cover yourself on defense. You can't super and then immediately RC to either confirm the hit or make yourself plus on block. You can't even fuzzy throw and have the opponent avoid it, then roam and cancel to make sure that you get them out of the air. If you're doing something defensive, you are committing to whatever option that is. And personally, I think this makes defense much more interesting. Having to assign yourself to a specific action that can have a very high reward at the end of it means that there's a lot more high-impact moments in a single match. Attacking throw no longer becomes an option that you can do to cover yourself while in a defensive situation. Now it becomes a hard call-out that, if fucked up, leads to a massive punishment on your end. Same with doing a throw on offense. You are essentially calling out that your opponent is not going to do anything about it. And if they do, you're kinda fucked. It's been like this with DPs for a while, so I'm glad to see every defensive mechanic now has that exact kind of treatment. Alongside this, the corner is now much more important. Not because of any changes to the corner itself, but because of the changes to the rest of the arena. Mid-screen combos are generally much less impactful now. Characters are able to get a couple of hits and a good knockdown off of a mid-screen combo, but are not going to be sending you from corner to corner relatively easily, especially if they don't have any meter. Alongside this, a lot of characters still kept their wall bounces and ways to extend combos in the corner. Meaning that if you get someone in the corner, you're now actually going to be doing way more damage compared to what you would be doing mid-screen. Obviously, wall break is still a thing. However, positive bonus afterwards has been adjusted to make the mid-screen pressure you get after it just that little bit worse. If you use a super to break the wall, you get a hard knockdown, like before. However, you suffer a meter penalty, meaning you really don't get a lot of positive bonus meter. However, if you break the wall with a normal or special attack, you don't get a hard knockdown, but you get the full positive bonus, allowing you to get way more meter than you would if you broke the wall with the super. There is now a genuine thought process on how you want to break the wall. Previously, it used to be you wait until the opponent was about to stick to the wall or react to them getting stuck, and then immediately go into super in order to get a hard knockdown and continue your pressure. Now, the option to break the wall with a normal can be enticing, but also the option to end the combo early and go for something else is even more enticing. The corner is extremely powerful right now, and wanting to keep it is something that a lot of players are actually apting to more. This indirectly increases the amount of touches that a character needs to get a kill. Strive notoriously was a 2 to 3 touch game for a very long time. However, nowadays, with mid-screen combos not being as impactful, and the corner having you actually weigh up what you want to do when you break the wall, leads to the game having just a couple more interactions between each characters, and it feels so much better for that. And finally, basically everyone in the cast got nerfed. Strive has always had a design philosophy of refinement. When the game was still new, a lot of people pointed out that characters lost several moves that didn't exactly mesh well with their game plan. A lot of older Guilty Gears have characters with moves that aren't exactly fitting. It's not like they can't work, but generally they go against the intended purpose of the character, or are just a little bit weird with how the rest of the kit works. Strive, on the other hand, generally had no wasted moves. If a character had any special move, there was a reason for it, and there would be a general use for this. They didn't get it right 100% of the time, and there were still moves that were generally so bad that people wouldn't use them at all, but characters' kits were refined for a specific purpose. 2.0 seems to try and reclaim that position. Several characters did get new moves, however, they interact directly with the powerful parts of their kits. Souls is a high damage combo extender, Kai's is a unique way to apply shock state and improve his zoning game, Nagoriyuki allows him to mess with his blood in a unique way, as well as giving him a little bit of that mix-up potential that he had during Season 3, and Leo gets to be even stronger in back turn, because of course he does. This goes for the majority of the cast as well. Characters were balanced in such a way where their general game plan was emphasized around how their balance was. We'll get more onto this a little bit later, but generally characters are designed now to have some kind of weakness. And if they're a generalist all-rounder character, they can't be the strongest at anything. And finally, the game is still bullshit. A lot of people saw the changes that were happening to Strive and got a little bit worried that they were toning down the bullshit a little bit too much. But don't worry, it's still Guilty Gear. I think a big thing that gets lost in a lot of discussion about how Strive currently is you will still hate fighting every single character, and your character can absolutely still do some grimy bullshit. We have not lost that touch that made Strive a Guilty Gear game. It is still very much there, and it is still very much the most bullshit out of any of the modern fighting games. And I love it for that. So with that, let's go on to singing the update's praises. What did they do right? I think the best thing I can say about 2.0 is that it feels like more Strive. If 1.0 was the experimental take that they wanted to do on the entire franchise, 2.0 is them knowing exactly what they want to do and showing exactly how the game is meant to be. A lot of the balance nerfs just squished the gap between characters and made it so that every character is somewhat viable. And all of the characters have their own unique things to do and things that you would like about them over other characters. It's very interesting 5 years into a game still seeing a wide, diverse, and healthy competitive scene with a bunch of mains for seemingly every character. Granted, some characters are still played more than others, but if you were to enter 5 different tournaments, the likelihood is you're going to be fighting unique characters in every single one. It's an absolute joy to see such a healthy roster of characters, where it really feels like just about anyone can win. Alongside that, the removal of Wild Assault has been a massive boon for the update. Wild Assault was a very controversial mechanic for the longest time, and it led to a lot of situations where the game just revolved around it. Obviously, some characters were designed with Wild Assault in mind, but even then, when Wild Assault was at its peak, every character was using it in a bunch of different situations. It made small mistakes into absolutely massive ones. and snowballed any situation into an absolute shit show for the losing player. It was like an anti-comeback mechanic. The player that gets a hit first is able to just snowball it no matter how big the hit was. With it gone, it makes mistakes much more visible and understandable. Small mistakes still feel like small mistakes and don't spin out of control as quickly as bigger mistakes do. Not to mention that the characters that really did rely on Wild Assault got changes in such a way where they became pretty viable without it. The game just feels so much more fun to play without it. And even just looking at a match, it looks a lot nicer without seeing a character randomly flash a color and suddenly go from half screen to directly in someone's face. Wild Assault is something that I'm probably not going to miss, and I'm extremely happy it's gone because the game feels so much healthier for it now. But that doesn't mean that everything is perfect. 2.0 hasn't been without controversy. So, what did they get wrong? Well, while the majority of the balance changes were something that I and the majority of the community liked, there was definitely some mishaps. Not everything has been absolutely perfect. Ignoring bugs for a second, a couple of the characters got changed in such a way where they either lost their identity or they got nerfed so much that their identity doesn't matter as much. Characters like Testament and Bridget got hit in such a way where their close-range pressure and combos just aren't as viable anymore. So while before the update they had a general hit-and-run playstyle, they now seem to rely more on basic zoning with good normals and funky projectiles. And while the buffs they did get to replace some of these combos could technically work on paper, in reality, they're just nowhere near the things that they need, and entire playstyles for these characters have just been seemingly taken away overnight. They're not alone, though. Abba got changed in such a way where her playstyle didn't really change, she just lost out heavily in almost any situation. Players that are willing to sit at further ends of the screen and wait for Abba to make a mistake are now heavily rewarded. And Abba herself essentially has to rely on the opponent making a mistake if she ever wants to win. She can still snowball a match extremely quickly if the opponent guesses wrong several times, but the change to how her Jealous Rage works means that once the opponent actually gets a hit, she's not really able to do anything, and she sometimes just becomes a free win if you're willing to play patient. Alongside this though, there have been a couple of bugs. Bugs have made characters way stronger than they should actually be. A lot of changes were put on Asuka and Happy Chaos, two of the most technical characters in the game, with both of these characters receiving extremely strong sequences, one being a slightly cool way to get around his mana economy problems, and the other being so controversial that players have started banning him from tournaments, with other players calling for him to be completely banned before the game's first major. If you don't know, Happy Chaos right now has a literal infinite block string, which, while slightly hard to execute, once done correctly, leaves the entire match up to a execution check on the Chaos's part. Because of this, high-profile tournaments like TNS have started banning the character, with it being expected that other brackets are going to follow suit. Arxis, however, have said specifically that he will be allowed at EVO Japan, and while this is still happening, I don't want to comment on anything. I'm just going to sit there and watch the fire. They have said, though, they are aware of the situation and are working on a patch to come out after EVO Japan. We'll have to see how everything goes, though. And honestly, that's kind of it for the bad. The balance changes are a little bit weird, and there was an issue with ranked which has seemingly been resolved now, but we know that the development team are keeping an eye on several of the issues, already putting out 2 separate blog posts talking about different issues in the game. It's unclear on when we're actually going to get this patch. My thought would be sometime after EVO Japan, so maybe the first week of May? We'll have to see. But the fact that Arxis are actually listening to people and keeping an eye on it is very nice. Arc System Works are still doing what they do best though, which is sitting back and watching the community as they do things. If you don't know, Arxis is not a company to knee-jerk reaction patch something. In Season 4, we had a emergency balance patch 2 months after the patch originally came out. Arxis do not do things immediately. They like to sit and watch and let players figure out how things work before they themselves say, this is too much. It's obviously going to upset some people. However, I generally like the idea of Arxis not balancing things based off of the first reactions when something is found. Because of that, I think that the next patch that we're getting is actually going to be quite involved and interesting. They like to sit and wait for people to find tech themselves, and then when it's discovered, they actually balance around the tech sometimes. So who knows? It's probably still worth having that character that you like. Maybe you'll just find the tech that actually cracks them open this time. As for the general state of 2.0, the game itself is in a much healthier place than it was this time last year. I am absolutely loving playing the game. And while I wouldn't necessarily say it feels like a sequel in a traditional sense, it definitely feels like a title update. Does that make sense? General system changes change the entire way that the game is played fundamentally. However, the characters themselves still feel the exact same, with some notable exceptions. Alongside that, there's still things in this that we haven't even gotten access to. The Blazing Pass is set to come out sometime next month. Who knows, maybe it'll be in the middle of the month. Maybe it'll be at the end, Arxis. They take forever with these things. And in some interviews since 2.0 has come out, they've mentioned modes that haven't been touched in a very long time. They themselves said that this is the start of the 2.0 journey, and we have much more to be excited about going forward. So, I'm excited to see what happens. The future for Strive is looking bright. And while in a traditional sense I wouldn't say 2.0 feels like a sequel, it definitely feels like a fighting game sequel. And that makes me very happy. I hope we get 5 more years of this game. That'd be absolutely sick.